Let's waste no more time. Let's go ahead and show you the top 10 picks in Ryan's latest mock draft. It will not surprise you who is going at number one, and that is one Caleb Williams to the Bears. Ryan, it seems like we can go ahead and start writing in Sharpie these days, but how sure a thing is Williams number one?
I feel like Emily, there's a better chance that I will have a full head of hair 3 weeks from now than the Bears not taking Caleb Williams at this point. It's funny because in the fall, and Cooper makes an interesting point, right? Because there's a huge difference. I feel like what you guys do, you have the kids, you raise the kids, and you're sending them off to college, and then they're graduating and get the jobs. And when they come to us, in terms of the draft, they're getting their first real job. They buy their first suit, and it feels like sort of that progression. And I remember in the fall, there was some speculation whether Caleb would be quarterback one. And I remember watching him midway through the college season thinking USC's offensive line is struggling. The defense might even be worse. Caleb is doing a lot of the heavy lifting. And I couldn't quite wrap my brain around the idea that maybe Drake May might be QB1. But those conversations were being had by teams and certainly in the media. But I think what Caleb was able to accomplish last year, which was probably one of his toughest years as a football player, and his essentially dragging this offense up and down the field. And one of the pushbacks you got is that, well, he can't play in structure. It turns out he can play in structure. And if you look at the metrics, he does throw 3 seconds or less about 55% of the time last year, which was just slightly less than what Drake May did. Again, the offensive line was a huge issue, but some of these off-platform plays, the arm strength is there. Yes, he's only 6 feet tall, but he is very, very, very special, even when you're talking about professional athletes and the things they're capable of doing. And there are very few people on planet Earth that can do what he does. We had a chance to talk to him at the combine. And one of the things you want to see when you talk to him at the combine is what kind of person is he? How does he interact? And he was more humble than I expected him to be. He was very gracious and answered questions. And he said the toughest thing for him last year wasn't necessarily the Notre Dame game where he threw 3 interceptions in the first half. It was learning not to try to do too much. He said Lincoln Riley had to sit him down and say, listen, you have to live to play another down. You can't live and die with each play, because it was tearing him up inside. And we saw glimpses of that in terms of the emotion we saw from him. But I feel like the Bears would make a huge mistake by not taking him here. It's incredibly difficult to predict these quarterbacks, but Caleb feels like as close to a sure thing, fingers crossed, as you're going to see in this draft class at the quarterback position anyway.
Yeah, I think you said it. I mean, I think you said sure thing. When you evaluate the quarterbacks, I think you can talk yourself into Drake May. You can talk yourself into Jayden Daniels. But the one thing with Caleb Williams, I think he gives you the best combination of ceiling and floor. And I think you also brought up the great point. He had a lot on his shoulders. You're talking about the Heisman winner coming back. USC had to chase a lot of points. Only LSU gave up more points. USC was in that low 40 range in terms of giving up points defensively. So a lot put on his shoulders. And I agree, Ryan, from the standpoint of you're talking about a guy that gets this label of being like a creative magician because, well, most of the time he's outside of the pocket. He has to play off platform. I think that's kind of developed some habits that are correctable at the next level. But I'd love to fit in Chicago as well. They move on from Justin Fields. They clear the way for a guy like Caleb Williams. And you think about what they've done this offseason. You go out, you get Keenan Allen the year before, you get DJ Moore, you bring in a guy like Gerald Everett to pair with Cole Kmet. They've done a lot. They invested in the offensive line last year in Darnell Wright. And not to mention, you got the number 9 pick in the draft as well. So if there's some more firepower on the board, certainly a lot of receivers in that top 10 mix discussion. So out of all the notable number 1 picks that there has been in recent history, I actually think that Caleb Williams is going to be in a pretty good situation in Chicago if that does end up being the pick.
Yeah, it's always the tough part about when these quarterbacks get drafted early on is they're coming in to be the savior with not a whole lot going on around him. But as you're seeing Chicago, you'll see in this mock draft, they have a few more picks, a few more moves up their sleeve. Before we move on to the wide receiver talk, I know that you're itching to do that, Coop. Quarterbacks, obviously, most important position. And Ryan, you have them going 1, 2, 3. You got Jayden Daniels going to Washington and Drake May going to New England. So I'll put you on the spot here, Coop. Of those 3 guys, who has the best NFL career?
Well, I'm going to have to go with the number 1 draft choice, right? I mean, that's the guy that I feel the best about. I think, a lot of people, the consensus at the top is Caleb Williams. But I'll tell you this, the guy that I glance over today a little bit, and I kind of like this from a snapshot view, doing some homework, right? Being able to rush before the assignment. Drake May is the one guy I am so fascinated with. When you think about the prototypical quarterback, 6'4 plus, 225 pounds, you throw in the tape against Georgia Tech, and it's just an exhibition of NFL throw after NFL throw. Now, there's some things he's certainly going to have to tighten up, has a tendency to play some hero ball at times. But, I mean, you think about the physique, you think about the background. He comes from a family of athletes. He is a really, really interesting prospect. If you can get him in the right environment, get him coached up, I can see a big future for Drake May. So I'm going to go with Caleb Williams, but the one guy that I'm kind of like when I put my head on the pillow that maybe keeps me up at night, it would be Drake May.
I'll just say this about Drake May, and that's a fantastic point. Last week, we were at the pro days for Jayden Daniels, and the next day we were in Chapel Hill watching Drake May. And the downside to Drake May is that he looks like he's 12 years old in the face, but that's not his fault. He looks like a grown man in terms of being 6'4", 227 is what he weighed in at, gained a few pounds since the combine. But you make an important point, Coop, and one that I have to keep reminding myself, because there is some hero ball on Drake May's tape. But here's the thing. Drake May is 21 years old. He's played 2 years of college football. Prior to that, he was behind Sam Howell. Jayden Daniels, Bo Nix, Michael Penix Jr. have played a combined 15, maybe even 16 years of college football. They've been there for a while, and they've gotten a lot better, and I think that's important to keep in mind. I made this mistake with Justin Herbert a few years ago coming out. His final year at Oregon wasn't exactly what top 5 tape looked like. He ended up going after Tua. I think if you do the redraft, Justin Herbert has proven in terms of the measurables, he has the part and the arm strength, but he is also a winner, and in the right system, he can have a ton of success. And I think to your point, all these quarterbacks have to be in the right place. And if Drake May goes to New England with the Patriots, you hope that they surround him much better than they did with Mac Jones, which just seemed like they were trying to actively sabotage his career. But I think you have to be patient with Drake. You have to understand he's early on in this football journey. And just because you didn't see it play in and play out, to your point, you saw glimpses of it, and they were big boy glimpses, and those are things you can get excited about. But you have to understand these guys are going to get better. And in Drake's case, he's 2, even 3 years younger than some of the other guys he's in the same draft class with. And I just have to remind myself that, because I fell for that trap in Justin Herbert, and that's on me. I don't think I'm going to try to avoid doing it again in this case with Drake.
Yeah, 2 guys that both looked very young coming out of college, but can grow into the position and continue to get better. That's what you certainly hope. You draft for positional upside as well. Speaking of quarterbacks, so you do have another quarterback taken in the top 5, and that is J.J. McCarthy, but it is not the team that originally is selecting there in the Chargers. You have a mock trade alert here with the Vikings coming up to snatch him, or opposite. The Vikings are picking at 5. The Chargers coming up to snatch him. I obviously love the connection there with Jim Harbaugh. It seems like that just makes a lot of sense. But what factored into this mock trade for you?
I'm really interested to hear Coop's thoughts on J.J. McCarthy, because you watched J.J. play, and he wasn't asked to do a lot at Michigan. Not his fault. That team won the national title for a reason, in part because of J.J., in part because of the offensive line, the run game, and that lights-out defense. Here's the thing. When you go back and watch J.J.'s snaps, 3rd and 6 to 10 yards, he looks like an all-star, like a future Hall of Famer. He was absolutely lights out. He completed 72% of his passes in those situations, 5 touchdowns, no turnovers. He was even better under pressure in those situations, completing 75% of his throws and had 4 touchdowns and no turnovers. So he can do it when he's asked to. He just wasn't asked to do it a lot. Now, if I'm being honest with you, I think JJ, based on his body of work in college, is probably a late first rounder for me. But he has the athleticism. He has the arm strength. He has the size. We talked to him at the combine, and good luck finding someone more charismatic and who was a better leader than J.J. McCarthy, because after we spoke with him, I was like, okay, let's take him first overall. I was excited just to have the opportunity to speak with him. But I think the tape tells a different story than the Caleb and Jayden and even Drake May tape, and certainly Michael Penix Jr., who I think gets short shrift sometimes during the draft process, but I understand why teams fall in love with him. But the thing for me, Coop, is this. If you're the Vikings and you have picks 11 and 23, and you're probably going to have to give a 2025 first rounder to jump up to 5, you're essentially trading 2 first-round picks for the same type of player who's QB4 in this draft, as opposed to the 3 teams at the top who only use their first-round pick for a quarterback who they have graded even higher. So I think that's the danger you're in if you're Minnesota. Kevin O'Connell is great with young quarterbacks, and if you don't have a quarterback, you don't have anything. So I understand the urgency for Minnesota, but it feels like there's a lot stacked against the Vikings if they don't get this right.
Yeah, I do think there is a drop off, right? You look at the top of the draft, maybe Caleb Williams, he's in his own category. And then you look at Jayden Daniels, Drake May, and those are 2 guys with developmental upside that can get you excited. The J.J. McCarthy is really interesting because it's funny. He's the guy that you would label a winner. I mean, he's the guy that busted the Ohio State notion over the last 3 years with Michigan. Obviously, Michigan winning the national championship. You go back all the way to his high school days at Illinois, then the IMG Academy. That's what this guy is. Now, people kind of reading into the hockey background as well. He is tough. He has all those intangibles. But Ryan said it. I mean, you talked about a complementary offense. This was one of the best offensive lines in college football over the last 3 years. You had a running game in Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards as well. When it was his time to step up, JJ McCarthy did that. I think this is a guy you win with, not because of, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But out of all the fits, Ryan, I think with the quarterback position, this is the one that gets me the most excited. You think about J.J. McCarthy working with Kevin O'Connell. I think there's going to be some other teams out there. Like I'd keep an eye on Denver, Sean Payton, Las Vegas, and Antonio Pierce. They're all going to be looking for a young quarterback. And I certainly agree. I think any year these quarterbacks are going to be overvalued. And I'd have probably J.J. McCarthy anywhere from the 20 to 40 range, kind of depending on who you are. But because of those intangibles, because of the winning pedigree, and because of a sense of confidence and belief in some of these organizations, whether it be Minnesota and a young coach like Kevin O'Connell or Sean Payton, there's going to be a team willing to roll the dice, get a guy like J.J. McCarthy on a rookie contract and kind of see what that looks like. So I'm fascinated with this one. You know, I said this is the name that's kind of heating up with the last couple of weeks until the NFL draft. This is one that I think is the on-field fit and what he's going to be surrounded by is going to be incredibly important to his success. And obviously, we talked about environment with any young play caller, but especially J.J. McCarthy. I feel like that's kind of the story with him.